Glass exploded across the hardwood floor. Shards hit the drywall like shrapnel, scattering across the woven rug in the entryway. I stood completely still in the pitch-black hallway, gripping the edge of the mahogany console table so hard my knuckles burned with the pressure. Through the splintered frame of my front door, a heavy iron crowbar swung again. Wood snapped. Metal groaned against the deadbolt. The man on the porch swung with the frantic, exhausting rhythm of someone who came to do permanent, irreversible damage. The cold night air rushed through the shattered panels, carrying the scent of damp earth and his ragged, panicked breathing. His name was Trevor. He was hunting me, but the real nightmare was how he knew exactly where to strike. He knew the precise layout of my living room, down to the location of the alarm keypad. He knew my fiancé was supposed to be hundreds of miles away on a business trip tonight. He knew all of it because my future sister-in-law handed him the blueprint. Just 1 block away, parked in the heavy shadows beneath a dead street lamp, Lauren sat behind the wheel of her sedan. She was probably chewing her fingernails down to the quick, staring at her dashboard clock, waiting for a madman to clean up the mess she created. She thought she was the mastermind tonight. She thought she was finally putting me in my place, teaching me a lesson in humility. She was wrong. My trap was already set, and she had just walked blindly into a psychological guillotine. My name is Beatrix. I am 28 years old, and I spend my days teaching high school juniors. I dissect teenage mean girl psychology for a living. I break up cafeteria turf wars and decode passive-aggressive gossip before the morning bell even rings. I map out the social hierarchies of adolescence, watching how easily lies spread and reputations crumble over petty jealousies. I should have recognized the rot in my own family much sooner. I should have seen the rusted knives hiding behind Lauren's perfectly practiced smiles. Lauren was my brother Aaron's fiancée. To the outside world, she played the ultimate peacemaker, the glue holding our fragmented family together. She showed up to Sunday dinners holding fresh-baked casseroles in ceramic dishes, offering everyone unwanted life advice in a sickly sweet, melodic voice. She remembered birthdays, mailed holiday cards on time, and always volunteered to organize the summer barbecues. But behind closed doors, underneath that pristine veneer of domestic perfection, she was consumed by a suffocating, rabid jealousy. She despised the life I was building. More specifically, she despised my fiancé, Parker. Parker was building a logistics business from the ground up. He worked grueling, relentless hours, leaving before the sun came up and returning long after dark. But he always showed up when it mattered. He bought us a beautiful, solid home in a quiet neighborhood. He protected me. He listened to me. Aaron, on the other hand, was completely spineless. My brother was a man who shrank into the wallpaper to avoid conflict, a man who would rather apologize to a brick wall than stand up for himself. He nodded along to Lauren's every demand, surrendering his paycheck, his free time, and his dignity just to keep her quiet. Lauren hated the stark contrast between the two men. She needed to drag Parker down to make her own miserable relationship look like a grand prize. She loved to corner me in the kitchen while washing dishes, trapping me between the counter and the refrigerator. She would dry a ceramic plate slowly, dripping poison directly into my ear with a terrible, pitying smile. "Parker canceled his weekend trip with you again," she would ask, her voice dripping with fake maternal concern. Poor thing. See, that is exactly what happens when you date a man who only worships his bank account. He buys you a nice leather purse and leaves you sitting in this big empty house like a decorative doll. Look at Aaron. His paycheck is tiny. Sure. But he never dares talk back to me. A guy like Parker will toss you out the second you inconvenience him. You really need to stop living in a fantasy world. Beatrix. I swallowed the lump in my throat and scrubbed the pans harder. I kept the peace for my brother's sake. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood, smiling through the insults because society conditions us to swallow disrespect to keep the family table quiet. That was my fatal flaw. Because Lauren's petty kitchen insults were just the warm-up routine. Her true masterpiece of manipulation involved a man named Trevor Watson. Trevor was an old, loyal friend of Aaron's, a fixture in our lives since childhood. 6 months ago, Trevor's entire world collapsed into ash. His pregnant wife was driving home from a prenatal appointment when she was struck and killed by a drunk driver crossing the center line on the highway. The impact was catastrophic. The driver went to state prison and ended up taking his own life in a holding cell shortly after the sentencing. Trevor was left with nothing but an empty nursery, medical bills, and a mind fractured by agonizing, unprocessable grief. He was drowning in a dark ocean of trauma. He desperately needed psychiatric help. He needed medication, therapy, and an intervention. Instead, Lauren handed him a loaded weapon and pointed him directly at me. She went to Trevor's apartment under the guise of dropping off groceries. She sat on his stained couch, surrounded by unpacked baby boxes, and fed him a story so deeply unhinged it still makes my stomach turn. She told Trevor that the drunk driver wasn't a random stranger. She told him the driver was my toxic ex-boyfriend. She spun a massive, psychotic web of lies, claiming I was out drinking with the guy that night, that I provoked him into driving recklessly down that specific highway, and that I used Parker's massive bank accounts to pay off the local precinct to scrub my name from the police reports. None of it was true. Not a single syllable. I had never met the man who drove that car. But Trevor was a broken man desperate for a living, breathing villain to blame for his empty house. And Lauren gift-wrapped my name for him, with a few whispered lies over a cup of lukewarm coffee. She turned a grieving widower into a rabid attack dog, and she aimed him directly at my quiet life. The harassment graduated from anonymous packages to public ambushes within a fortnight. Trevor started showing up outside my classroom windows at the high school, standing at the edge of the football field. He would hold crushed grocery store carnations, staring through the glass with hollow, dead eyes. He followed me through the aisles of the local supermarket, whispering threats from behind the canned goods. The psychological toll was suffocating. I started checking the locks on my doors 3 times a night. I jumped at the sound of the wind rattling the window panes. But the true breaking point, the moment the illusion of my family shattered completely, happened on a humid Sunday afternoon, right on Aaron's back patio. Thick smoke rose from the charcoal grill. The smell of burning fat and cheap hot dogs hung heavy in the stagnant summer air. Uncles, aunts, and cousins clustered around the wooden picnic table, laughing at some dull, repetitive joke Aaron told. I stood by the plastic cooler, reaching down for a bottled water, completely defenseless. The wooden gate at the side of the yard creaked open with a sharp whine. Trevor stepped through the gap. His clothes were rumpled and stained. His eyes looked sunken, rimmed in angry, infected red, darting around the yard like a cornered animal searching for an exit. Before anyone could shout a warning or ask him what he was doing there, he locked his gaze onto me. The air vanished from my lungs. He charged across the manicured grass with terrifying, unpredictable speed. Heavy hands seized my hair. A violent yank threw me sideways, crashing me against the wooden picnic table. My ribs slammed into the oak, knocking the breath from my chest. A plate shattered on the concrete. Pain flared across my lower back as I collapsed, gasping for oxygen, tasting copper. I waited for my brother to move. I waited for anyone to step between us. Aaron froze, dropping his spatula. My uncles stepped backward, pulling their wives behind them like cowardly spectators. They stared in paralyzed silence, Nobody raised a hand or shouted to stop. Their collective cowardice formed a wall of betrayal, leaving me alone on the concrete. Before Trevor could lunge again, Parker moved with explosive force. He didn't waste time yelling. He slammed his shoulder into Trevor's chest, sending him spinning backward. A single right hook caught Trevor squarely on the jaw. He hit the grass hard, knocked out cold. Parker stood over the unconscious man, fists clenched, scanning my family's frozen faces with absolute disgust. Then Lauren stepped forward. She bypassed Trevor and walked straight to me, her face twisting into a triumphant smirk masked as concern. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin as she hauled me upright. "Look at the absolute mess you provoked." "Beatrix," Lauren hissed, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You just had to flash your expensive jewelry and rub your perfect, easy life in a grieving man's face, did you not? Trevor is sick, and you deliberately poked the bear, always making everything about your miserable ego. You brought this violence right to our doorstep." I ignored her venom and looked at my brother. Aaron stood frozen, staring at his shoes, refusing to meet my eyes. He nodded slowly, validating her toxic poison with his silence. He blamed me for bleeding on his patio. The truth settled over me. They weren't just bystanders. They were accomplices. My family decided my safety was too inconvenient to defend. Parker stepped between us, slapping Lauren's hand away. "Touch her again, and I will not just hit him." Lauren scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, stop playing the dramatic hero. She asked for every single bit of this." I locked eyes with my brother one last time, memorizing his spineless betrayal. They wanted a victim to sacrifice to keep the peace. They had no idea the monster they were actually feeding. The fallout didn't end Trevor's rage, it widened his target. 2 nights later, a cinder block shattered Aaron's front window. Trevor stood on the lawn, screaming about cover-ups and conspiracies. Aaron finally found a sliver of courage, charged through the door, and tackled his former best friend into the mud. Fists flew in the dark, pinned against the wet grass. Trevor's paranoia ripped the darkest secret wide open. "Your sister is a murderer," Trevor shrieked. "She killed my family. Lauren told me everything. Go ask your lying fiancé." The accusation froze Aaron mid-punch. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Aaron's trembling voice repeated Trevor's exact words. He wanted reassurance so he could go back to his quiet ignorance and pretend his future wife wasn't a sociopath. I ended the call without answering. The final piece of the puzzle snapped into terrifying clarity. Lauren orchestrated the entire nightmare. She weaponized a grieving man's trauma and risked my life to win a petty family rivalry. Filing formal complaints or begging for text records takes months of bureaucracy. Cops need probable cause. Lawyers demand retainers. I had zero time for the legal system. I deal with bullies in my classroom every day. You never fight a liar with facts. You fight them with their own blinding paranoia. I dialed Lauren's number, pinching my arm to force a panicked sob as the line connected. "Lauren, please, you have to help me," I wailed into the receiver. "The lead detective just left my house. A judge signed a massive, sweeping warrant. Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp. They are seizing every single family bank account, every laptop, and every cell phone. They think someone in this family paid off that drunk driver. And they are using forensic software to trace every text message sent in the last 12 months to find the link." Dead silence swallowed the line. The psychological trap clamped shut. Lauren had zero financial connection to the crash, but she knew her phone contained a goldmine of psychotic text messages pushing Trevor toward violence. If the police cloned her device, she'd trade her wedding dress for a prison uniform on felony conspiracy charges. Cornered rats bite. Lauren panicked exactly as predicted, unleashing her sheer terror on Aaron. When he weakly questioned her, She detonated. "You dare question my loyalty?" she shrieked. "You let your psychotic sister poison your brain against your own family. Choose right now. Aaron. Choose her or choose me." She stormed out, locking herself inside her sedan down the street, gripping the steering wheel. She dialed Trevor's number and fed him one final lie. She told him I had a physical binder of fake evidence designed to put him away in a psych ward forever. She ordered him to break into my house tonight, assuming Parker was miles away on his business trip, and destroy the file. The crowbar smashed through the dead-bolted wood. The door swung open. Trevor stepped into my hallway, knuckles white around the heavy iron bar. He expected an easy victory. He crossed the threshold. 4 high-intensity floodlights ignited simultaneously, blazing with blinding light. Trevor dropped the crowbar. Pure panic seized his features as he threw his hands over his face in terror. Parker stepped out from the shadows. He had no need to throw a punch this time. I'd called the precinct hours ago. 2 police officers surged from the dining room, tackling Trevor and driving him into the hardwood. Handcuffs ratcheted over his wrists. Trevor's bravado vanished instantly. He shrieked out his confession right there on my rug, frantic to save his own skin. "She told me to do it." Trevor screamed. "Lauren sent me. She gave me the address. She is parked right down the street." The officers hauled Trevor upright and marched him out the front door, signaling the squad cars at the end of the block. I stepped onto the porch as sirens flashed to life. The cops swarmed Lauren's sedan and yanked the door open. Lauren fought them like a feral animal, clawing frantically at the steering wheel. The officers dragged her onto the asphalt, forcing her wrists behind her back. "Get your hands off me!" she shrieked. "Beatrix, you bloodthirsty bitch! I only wanted justice. You should have died in that crash." The cruiser doors slammed shut, sealing her venom inside. Tires screeched into my driveway a moment later. Aaron jumped out of his truck, looking completely shattered. He stared at the retreating cruisers, finally realizing the devastating cost of his cowardice. He stumbled onto my porch, reaching a trembling hand toward me. "Beatrix?" he stammered. "I had no idea she would go this far. I am so sorry. We can fix this. Please." I looked at the man who had watched a madman hurl me into a concrete table while he stared at his shoes. He chose his comfort over my safety. "There is nothing left to fix," I said. "You made your choice at the barbecue. Now live with it." I stepped inside and shut the splintered door right in his face. Parker wrapped a steady arm around my shoulders. Trevor was locked in a psychiatric hold. Lauren was in a county cell facing conspiracy charges, and Aaron was left standing alone in the cold, staring at a door that would never open for him again. The gavel came down on a rainy Tuesday morning. The justice system is slow, but Lauren's hubris left an undeniable paper trail of digital evidence. The judge called her actions a malicious manipulation of the vulnerable. He sentenced Lauren to 4 years in a state penitentiary. The court also ordered a restitution payment of $42,000 to cover the property damage, security upgrades, and legal fees. She wept openly in the courtroom, but those tears were purely for herself. Trevor was declared mentally unfit for standard prison. He was remanded to a high-security psychiatric facility for 6 years, finally receiving the intervention he needed. The social fallout rippled through our hometown with devastating speed. Within 48 hours of her mugshot hitting the registry, Lauren's pristine reputation shattered. The neighborhood association banned her parents from the block party, and her former bridesmaids deleted every trace of her from their social media feeds to protect their own standing. Aaron faced a different kind of ruin. He lost his management job because the embarrassing press became a liability. People crossed the street to avoid the man who stood by while his sister was attacked. He tried to call me twice. I let the calls ring into the void. He'd made his choice on the patio. 8 months passed. I was sitting at my kitchen island on a Thursday morning, sorting through the mail. Tucked between a utility bill and a flyer was a wrinkled beige envelope with the stamp of the state correctional facility. Lauren had used her weekly postage stamp to reach out to me. She filled 3 pages with frantic handwriting, smelling of industrial soap and desperation. She reminded me of the casseroles she used to bake, trying to rewrite history. Then she pivoted to a massive guilt trip. She claimed she only lied to Trevor to humble my ego for the greater good. Her final sentence was a desperate plea. She told me I ruined Aaron's life, reminded me we were family, and demanded I drop the restitution order so she could afford commissary. Before the break-in, a letter like that would have spiked my heart rate. I would have spent hours drafting a furious reply. That morning, I took a slow sip of my coffee, folded the pages back into the envelope, and walked over to the paper shredder. I fed the envelope into the slot, listening to the steel blades turn her toxic delusions into confetti. I tossed the shreds into the recycling bin and walked away. My house is no longer a bunker. It is a sanctuary. 4 months after the trial, Parker and I stood under a massive oak tree in our backyard and promised our lives to each other. There were no tense family dynamics hovering over us. We kept the guest list small. My fellow teachers stood by my side, and Parker's oldest friends, the ones who helped replace my splintered door, toasted our future. We ate roasted chicken, laughed until we ached, and drank cheap champagne. For the first time, my shoulders dropped. The constant anxiety completely vanished. We built a chosen family from the ground up. There are no passive-aggressive comments over dinner plates, only honest laughter, shared respect, and the certainty that the people at my table would defend my life with their own. That is the true definition of a bloodline. The hardest truth about betrayal is that it rarely comes from a masked stranger. It comes from the people standing comfortably inside your own house. Society conditions us to protect the family structure at all costs, to forgive the unforgivable just to keep the holidays comfortable. Peace built on your silent suffering is not peace at all. It is just a hostage situation with a polite dress code. If you take away anything from my survival, let it be these 3 rules. Rule number 1. The mask of the peacemaker is often worn by the architect of the war. The person demanding you compromise your boundaries to appease an abuser is trying to control you. True peace requires total accountability. Those demanding you forgive without a genuine apology are only protecting the predator. Rule number 2. Cowardice is an active choice. When a crowd steps back during an injustice, they are actively voting for your destruction to preserve their own comfort. Family members who watch you bleed to avoid creating a scene are not your family. They are bystanders wearing familiar faces, and you owe them nothing. Rule number 3. Never fight a liar with facts. Fight them with their own blinding paranoia. Toxic people are terrified of the light, building houses out of dry brush and deceit. You never need to tear their house down with logic. You only need to strike a single match of truth. Walk away, and watch them burn in their own panic. I look back at the woman scrubbing dishes, swallowing insults just to keep her brother smiling, and I barely recognize her. She traded her fundamental dignity for a fake harmony. I will never make that trade again. Look around your family table tonight. Watch the silent dynamics. Who is demanding you stay quiet to keep the peace? And more importantly, whose peace are you really keeping? If you have ever walked away from toxic family to save your sanity, tell me your story in the comments below. Let us build a community of survivors who absolutely refuse to stay silent.